The cabin buzzed with the usual hum of passengers settling into their seats. Maya sat upright, her posture confident, fingers tapping lightly on the keyboard of her laptop. She had earned this seat, not just by paying for it, but by years of hard work that had brought her here, to first class, where she belonged as much as anyone else. Then came the voice, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the noise like a knife. "Excuse me, ma'am," the flight attendant said, her tone polite but laced with something colder beneath the surface. "Are you sure you're in the right seat? This is first class." Maya froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Around her, whispers rippled through the rows. Some curious, some judgmental, all invasive. A man behind her leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, I'm sure she just wandered up here by accident. Maybe she got lost on her way to coach?" Laughter followed, forced and cruel, filling the space between them like smoke. Maya swallowed hard, biting back the anger rising in her throat. Without saying a word, she pulled out her boarding pass and handed it over. The attendant scanned it slowly, deliberately prolonging the moment. Every second felt like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice was clipped. Everything seems to be in order." But instead of walking away, she lingered, her gaze sweeping over Maya's tailored blouse and slacks. "You know," she added, her lips curling into a faint smirk, "this section has a strict dress code. Perhaps next time, something more formal would be appropriate." The jab landed squarely, stinging more than Maya let on. She bit her tongue, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her falter. Her mind flashed back to earlier that day at security, a pat-down so invasive it left her feeling stripped of dignity, while white passengers breezed through without a second glance. It wasn't new. It was part of a pattern, one she had grown, accustomed to navigating but never accepting. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Maya noticed him, a familiar face stepping aboard last minute. Daniel Marcus, CEO of Skylink Airlines, walked past her row, glancing briefly in her direction before taking his seat. Maya didn't think much of it then, too consumed by her own thoughts to connect the dots. What she didn't realize yet was that Daniel wasn't just another executive flying first class. He carried secrets about the very system that oppressed her. Turbulence rocked the plane moments later, jolting everyone slightly in their seats. For Maya, it mirrored the storm brewing inside her. Frustration bubbled over into resolve. Enough, she thought, her jaw tightening. If they want to play dirty, fine. But they have no idea who they're dealing with. Months passed since that fateful flight, and Maya found herself transformed, not by choice but by necessity. She became a leading advocate for anti-discrimination reform in air travel, pushing for legislation that required airlines to track and report incidents of racial profiling. Her efforts weren't without resistance. Former colleagues accused her of ruining careers, painting her as a villain rather than a catalyst for change. But Maya stood firm, knowing the fight was far from over. One evening, as she sorted through mail at home, an envelope caught her eye. Inside was a letter from an anonymous whistleblower. Attached were documents, damning evidence implicating several major airlines in coordinated efforts to target passengers of color. One memo stood out, signed by executives from competing companies, outlining strategies to minimize liability while continuing discriminatory practices. Maya's hands trembled as she read it, realizing the scope of the conspiracy stretched far beyond Skylink. She reached out to Daniel immediately. "We need to act now," she said when he answered. "This isn't just about one airline. It's about exposing corruption across the entire industry." Together they launched a global investigation, uncovering layer upon layer of systemic racism embedded in aviation policies. The revelations shocked the world, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. At a packed auditorium filled with activists, lawmakers, and industry leaders, Maya took the stage. "This isn't just about flights or seats," she declared, her voice steady despite the weight of emotion behind it. "It's about dignity, respect, and justice for everyone." Applause erupted, echoing through the room as people rose to their feet. In that moment, Maya knew her journey wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone fighting for a fairer future. Have you ever faced discrimination while traveling? Maya asked directly into the camera during a follow-up interview. Share your story below. Together, we can demand accountability and create change. Her words resonated deeply, inspiring thousands to speak up and share their experiences. Racism still existed in countless forms, but Maya's courage reminded viewers of the power of resilience and authenticity in overcoming it. What would you have done in my situation? She challenged, her gaze piercing through the screen. Keep watching to see how justice is served, and learn how you can make a difference. With those final words, Maya stepped off screen, leaving behind a legacy of hope, rage, and inspiration. Maya sat in first class, her laptop open, and her mind focused on the documents in front of her. But something felt off. She could feel eyes on her. She glanced up briefly, catching the flight attendant's icy smile as she approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," the attendant said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Are you sure you're in the right seat? This is first class." Maya froze. Her stomach churned as whispers rippled through the rows around her. Someone behind her piped up sarcastically, "Oh, I'm sure she just wandered up here by accident. Maybe she got lost on her way to coach?" Forced laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Maya swallowed hard, biting back the anger rising in her throat. Without saying a word, she pulled out her boarding pass and handed it over. The attendant scanned it slowly, deliberately prolonging the moment. Everything seems to be in order," she muttered begrudgingly. But instead of walking away, she lingered, scrutinizing Maya's appearance. "You know, this section has a strict dress code. Perhaps next time something more formal would be appropriate." The jab stung deeply. Maya clenched her fists under the table, choosing silence over confrontation. Her mind flashed back to earlier that day at security, a pat-down so invasive it left her feeling stripped of dignity, while white passengers breezed through without a second glance. It wasn't new. It was part of a pattern, one she had grown accustomed to navigating but never accepting. During meal service, the same flight attendant returned with a tray of food. As she leaned over to serve another passenger flawlessly, she accidentally spilled red wine onto Maya's blouse. The liquid soaked into the fabric, spreading like the humiliation Maya felt creeping across her chest. "I'm so sorry," the attendant said, though her tone lacked sincerity. When Maya asked politely for assistance cleaning up, the attendant rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath, "Maybe don't bring your drama onto our flights." Nearby passengers began filming the interaction discreetly, capturing the tension in the air. One older white man leaned over and whispered sympathetically, "I've seen how they treat people like you. It's disgusting." His words offered fleeting validation, but they also reminded Maya how rare genuine allyship truly was. Mid-flight, Maya overheard two attendants gossiping near the galley. "Did you hear about the new memo?" one said with a smirk. "If they look suspicious, just flag them for extra screening. Management loves it." Her heart sank. This wasn't random. It was an institutionalized policy. Determined not to let it go unnoticed, Maya pulled out her phone and began recording interactions with the flight crew. Each dismissive remark and condescending glance became evidence, proof of the discrimination she endured. Meanwhile, Daniel Marcus watched intently from across the aisle. He leaned forward slightly, addressing the lead attendant. "What's this I hear about profiling passengers?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. The attendant shifted uncomfortably before admitting nervously, "There's been guidance to keep an eye on certain types of passengers." Disaster struck when a wealthy white woman suddenly accused Maya of stealing her expensive watch. Chaos erupted as the crew detained Maya mid-flight, dragging her off the plane upon landing. At airport security, she endured hours of grueling interrogation, with no one believing her innocence, not even the sympathetic older man who had witnessed earlier events. Alone in a cold interrogation room, Maya reflected on the countless injustices she'd faced throughout her life. Was it worth continuing the fight? The weight of systemic racism pressed down on her shoulders, tempting her to give up. But then she remembered the recordings. Just as hope seemed lost, she realized she had undeniable proof of the discriminatory treatment she endured. Maya's resolve reignited. She wouldn't let them win, not this time. As she replayed the footage in her mind, she remembered Daniel Marcus observing silently from across the aisle. His presence hinted at the possibility of an unexpected ally. For the first time since the ordeal began, Maya allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Maya sat at her kitchen table staring at the screen of her laptop. Her hands trembled as she uploaded the video, the footage that exposed Skylink Airlines' discriminatory practices to the world. The recording showed everything. The condescending remarks from the flight attendant, the whispers behind her back, the humiliation she endured in front of dozens of passengers. With a deep breath, she hit post and tagged Skylink Airlines. Within hours, the video went viral. Comments poured in by the thousands, some offering support, others expressing outrage. "This is exactly what happened to me," one person wrote. "Thank you for speaking out." Another added, "I can't believe this still happens in 2023. Conversations about systemic racism in air travel exploded online, with people sharing their own stories of mistreatment. But not everyone was supportive. Anonymous trolls began flooding Maya's social media accounts with hateful messages. "You're lying," one comment read. "No one treated you like that. Stop playing the victim." Others escalated to threats. "Watch your back. You'll regret making this up." Fear crept into Maya's chest, heavier with each notification. She unplugged her phone charger and turned off her laptop, retreating to a friend's house where she could lay low while the storm raged on. The next morning, Daniel Marcus stood before a packed room of reporters at an emergency press conference. Flanked by Maya, who looked both exhausted and resolute, he addressed the growing scandal head-on. "What happened to Ms. Carter is unacceptable," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It reflects deeper systemic issues within our industry, issues we must confront and dismantle." He continued, outlining sweeping reforms for Skylink Airlines, mandatory bias training for all employees, transparent audits of security protocols, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. As he spoke, cameras flashed, capturing every word. When he finished, he stepped aside, gesturing for Maya to take the podium. Maya gripped the edges of the lectern, her knuckles white. For a moment, she hesitated, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Then she began to speak. "Resilience isn't about never breaking. It's about finding the strength to keep going after you've been broken," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm here today because no one should have to endure what I did. No one should feel less than a human because of the color of their skin. We deserve dignity. We deserve respect." Her words resonated deeply, sparking a wave of comments online. Thousands shared their own experiences of racial profiling, on planes, in airports, even in everyday life. One woman wrote, "I was pulled aside at security 3 times last year while my white coworkers walked through without a second glance." A man added, "They accused me of stealing headphones on a flight once, never mind that I paid for first class." These stories created a sense of solidarity, reminding Maya, and everyone watching, that she wasn't alone. As the press conference drew to a close, a reporter asked Daniel why he had taken such a strong stance on this issue. He paused, his expression softening. "Years ago, my daughter was racially profiled during a family vacation," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "She was only 10 years old, but the way they treated her left scars I'll never forget. That's why I'm committed to change, not just for Maya, but for every person who has faced injustice in the skies." Afterward, Maya and Daniel met privately. Sitting across from each other in a quiet conference room, they discussed their next steps. "We need to hold the entire industry accountable," Maya said firmly. "Skylink is just the beginning." Daniel nodded, agreeing wholeheartedly. Together, they vowed to expand their efforts, targeting systemic racism across aviation. Standing beside Daniel later that evening, Maya felt a shift within herself. She was no longer just a passenger humiliated on a flight. She was a leader in the fight for justice. Her presence at the press conference marked a turning point. Not just for her, but for society as a whole. People were listening, and more importantly, they were acting. In the days that followed, the ripple effects of Maya's story became undeniable. Other airlines began reviewing their policies, fearing similar scandals. Lawmakers called for hearings on racial profiling in transportation. Activists rallied around Maya's cause, organizing protests and petitions demanding accountability. What started as one woman's fight had sparked a global movement. At a community event weeks later, Maya addressed a packed auditorium of activists, lawmakers, and industry leaders. "This isn't just about flights or seats," she declared, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "It's about dignity, respect, and justice for everyone." Applause erupted, echoing through the room as people rose to their feet. At that moment, Maya knew her journey wasn't over, but it was a start. "Have you ever faced discrimination while traveling?" She challenged the audience directly. "Share your story below. Together, we can demand accountability and create change." Her final words lingered in the air, inspiring hope and action long after the event ended. Months had passed since the incident on the flight, but Maya's life was anything but normal. She'd become a leading voice in the fight against racial profiling in air travel, her name now synonymous with resilience and justice. Her campaign had gained momentum, pushing for legislation that required airlines to track and address discriminatory practices. Every day felt like a battle. Emails flooded her inbox, interviews lined up back to back, and late nights turned into early mornings as she worked tirelessly to keep the movement alive. Skylink Airlines, once the source of her humiliation, began to transform under public pressure. They implemented sweeping reforms, becoming a model for diversity and inclusion within the aviation industry. Employees found guilty of discriminatory behavior were fired or reassigned, while victims received compensation and heartfelt public apologies. It was progress, but Maya knew it wasn't enough, not yet. Despite the wins, resistance lingered. Former colleagues accused her of ruining careers, their voices sharp with resentment. "You think you're some kind of hero?" one former coworker sneered during a heated phone call. "All you've done is make things worse for everyone." The words stung, planting seeds of doubt in Maya's mind. Was she doing the right thing? Has she gone too far? Late one night, sitting alone at her desk surrounded by papers and coffee cups, Maya wrestled with these thoughts. She stared at a photo on her laptop, a candid shot of herself speaking at a rally, her fist raised in defiance. That moment had been powerful, electric even. But now, fatigue weighed heavily on her shoulders. Then came the letter. An anonymous envelope arrived in her mailbox, its contents shocking even to someone who had seen so much already. Inside were documents detailing collusion among multiple airlines, not just Skylink, to target passengers of color. One memo stood out, signed by executives from competing companies outlining strategies to minimize liability while continuing discriminatory practices. Maya's hands trembled as she read through the pages, realizing the conspiracy stretched far beyond what she'd imagined. She reached out to Daniel Marcus immediately. "We need to act now," she said when he answered, her voice urgent but steady. "This isn't just about one airline. It's about exposing corruption across the entire industry." Together they launched a global investigation. What they uncovered was staggering. Systemic racism embedded deep within policies and procedures, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and denial. As evidence mounted, Maya and Daniel shared their findings with lawmakers, activists, and journalists, shining a light on the dark secrets of the aviation world. The culmination of their efforts came when Maya addressed a packed auditorium filled with activists, lawmakers, and industry leaders. Standing at the podium, she took a moment to collect herself before beginning. "This isn't just about flights or seats," she declared, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "It's about dignity, respect, and justice for everyone." Her words resonated deeply, sparking applause that rippled through the room like waves. People rose to their feet, moved not just by her story, but by the collective realization that change was possible and necessary. For many, this moment marked the beginning of something bigger than any one person, a movement toward justice. Afterward, Maya encouraged others to join the fight. "Have you ever faced discrimination like I did?" she asked directly, addressing both the audience and viewers watching online. "Share your story below and be part of the movement. Together, we can demand accountability." A narrator's voice echoed softly in the background, prompting reflection. What would you have done in Maya's situation? Keep watching to learn how you can make a difference. As the screen faded to black, text appeared urging viewers to stay engaged. If you think this was shocking, wait until you see what happens in our next story. Click here to watch. Finally, the video ended with an empowering message. Racism still exists in so many forms. Help us spread awareness by liking and sharing this video. Together we can demand accountability and create a fairer future for all. Maya leaned back in her chair after recording the final voiceover, exhaling deeply. The road ahead would still be long, but for the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Change was hard, messy, and often painful, but it was also inevitable, and she intended to see it through.